Imagine this. You dedicate 14 years of your life to one single profound goal, only to walk away and call the whole thing a failure. I mean, that sounds like a total tragedy, right? But as we're about to see, sometimes the deepest kind of success is actually hidden inside what looks like a complete and utter loss. So let's just dive right into that question. Keep it in the back of your mind as we go through this story. Is it even possible to pour so much of yourself into something so meaningful for so long, only for it to all add up to, well, nothing?
Now, the reason given for this so-called failure is what makes this so fascinating. Get this. It wasn't the teachers, it wasn't the monastery, it wasn't the path itself. The practitioner points the finger squarely at themselves, using one single powerful word: conceit. And trust me, understanding what that word really means in this context, that's the key to this whole thing. All right, so let's set the scene real quick. The journey kicks off in 2003 at a monastery in Thailand. It goes on for 14 years, wrapping up in 2017. But the real insight, the thing we're really digging into today, that doesn't come until much, much later, with the benefit of hindsight. Okay, so to get why it failed, we first have to understand the path itself. What exactly was this practice that demanded so much dedication? The ultimate goal, the big prize at the end of all this disciplined practice, was something they called the taming of the mind. But, and this is a big but, don't let that simple phrase fool you. Taming the mind wasn't just about, being a little calmer or less stressed. No. It was a euphemism for the highest possible spiritual goal you can imagine: awakening, enlightenment. The stakes here were absolutely massive. So how are you supposed to get there? The method was called the Budo practice, and on the surface, it sounds pretty straightforward. It basically boiled down to two things. First, you constantly, mentally repeat the word Budo, and second, you focus all of your attention on one specific spot in your body, the heart area, right behind the breastbone. And this right here is a crucial piece of the puzzle. This wasn't some strange, ineffective method. The practitioner personally saw it work for other people. They witnessed more than a few successes right there among their peers. So, if the path was legit, why did it fail for this one person? So, if the path itself was sound, what was the hangup? This brings us right back to that key word. The obstacle wasn't on the outside, it was an internal barrier, this thing called conceit. Now, when you and I hear the word conceit, we immediately think of pride, right? Arrogance, ego, but that's not what it means here at all. In this context, it was something way more subtle and honestly, probably more powerful. It was a deep, fundamental lack of confidence in the practice they were being taught. And why? Because they were already attached to a different method they'd learned before. And the admission is it's brutally honest. There's no waffling here. The core of the problem was just this internal feeling of doubt. They simply did not believe the Budo method was gonna work for them. Period. And that's the whole ballgame, right there. That internal state of doubt led directly to an external result. Because they didn't have confidence in the method, they just didn't do it properly. That disbelief crippled the whole effort right from the starting line. But this is where the story takes a really interesting turn. It pivots from a simple tale of failure into something way more complex, way more fascinating. Because while one journey was failing, another one was quietly succeeding in the background. Let's come back to this number for a second. 14. 14 years is an incredibly long time to stick with something you feel like you're failing at. Just think about that. Which, of course, raises the big, obvious question. If you don't believe in the number one method you're supposed to be practicing, and you know you aren't doing it right, why on earth would you stay in that community for over a decade? What could possibly keep you there? And here it is. Here is the answer. They stayed because they were finding success, just not with the monastery's official practice. They were actually making progress with the original system they had learned before they ever showed up. And this just lays out the paradox perfectly, doesn't it? You've got these two parallel tracks running at the same time. On track one, there's the monastery's required Budo practice, which, for our narrator, was a total failure fueled by that conceit. But on track two was their own practice, the Mahasi Sayadaw system. And on that path, they were getting some measure of success. And that was enough to keep them going for 14 years. But wait, the story's not over. Not by a long shot. Because years after leaving, a final, much deeper insight starts to emerge, one that basically reframes the entire experience. It's amazing what a little time and distance can do, right? The practitioner began to see the very method they had rejected in a totally new light. A real appreciation for that failed practice started to grow. They started to understand specific things about it that they just couldn't see before. Like, they realized it was an incredibly powerful tool for shutting down negative, malicious thoughts. They understood that you couldn't just reason it out. Its real value had to be directly experienced. And trying to fit it into some neat little scientific box? Yeah, that was completely missing the point. And this all leads to a classic, beautiful metaphor that just ties everything together perfectly. You have the finger, which is the method, the technique, the books, the Buddha practice, the Mahasi system, whatever. It's just the tool that points the way. And then you have the moon. That's the real goal, the direct experience, the enlightenment itself. The trap, you see, is getting so obsessed with which finger is the right finger that you completely forget to look up at the moon. So at the end of the day, what this 14-year failure reveals is a lesson for all of us. It asks us to take a look at our own lives, our jobs, our goals, our relationships, and ask ourselves a really simple but profound question. Where are we getting stuck on the method and completely losing sight of the real goal? What finger might you be mistaking for the moon?